Good day to each and everyone. We would like to present our presentation, which is all about social mobility and inequality. But before that, let me introduce first the highlights of this presentation. First, we will be talking about the facts about social mobility. Second, the facts about social inequality. Third, the connection or the relation of social mobility and inequality. And fourth, of how does this two affect into our society. And these are the learning objectives that we need to meet after this discussion. First, to define social mobility and related concepts, to identify the types of social mobility, to explain global inequality, and to know the importance of social mobility and inequality into our lives. So let's start. What is social mobility? Social mobility refers to the movement of individuals or groups in social positions over time. Most commonly, social mobility refers to the change in wealth and social status of individuals or families. However, it may also refer to changes in health status, literacy rate, education, or other variables among groups such as classes, ethnic groups, or countries. Social mobility is the degree to which, in a given society, an individual's, families, or group's social status can change throughout the course of their life through a system of social stratification. The origin of social mobility concept. Russian-born American sociologist and political activist Mr. Petrim Sorokin first introduced the concept of social mobility in his book, Social and Cultural Mobility. He states that there is no society that is completely open, such as the class system, and no society that is completely closed, like the caste system in India. According to Sorokin, no two societies are the same in terms of movement allowed and discouraged, and that the speed of social mobility can change from one time period to the next. It depends on how developed the society is. Such a societal shift can happen over time as individuals move from one position to another due to various social interactions. Mobility more or less provides people with benefits as they are motivated by different factors in society and work to reach new roles that offer them a better standard of living and greater rewards. People compete and cooperate with others in society to move up the social mobility ladder.
Social mobility can take different forms, and people can experience different types of mobility in different stages of their lives. The types of mobilities are independent of one another and can often overlap. They are only distinguished for the purpose of analysis. So, there are 6 types of social mobility. The first one is horizontal mobility. This occurs when a person changes their occupation, but their overall social standing remains unchanged. For example, if a doctor goes from practicing medicine to teaching in a medical school, the occupations change, but their prestige and social standing likely remain the same. Sorokin describes horizontal mobility as a change in religious, territorial, political, or other horizontal. The second one is vertical mobility. This refers to a change in the occupational, political, or religious status of a person that causes a change in their societal position. An individual moves from one social stratum to another. Vertical mobility can be ascending or descending. Example, ascending involves an individual moving from a group in a lower stratum to a higher one, or the creation of a similar group with a higher societal position, instead of side by side with its existing group. Descending mobility occurs, for example, when a businessman incurs losses in his business and is forced to declare bankruptcy, resulting in a move to a lower stratum of society. The third one is upward mobility. This is when a person moves from a lower position in a society to a higher one. It can also include people occupying higher positions in the same societal group. However, upward mobility, while seen as a good thing, can also come at a cost for individuals. Example, when a person moves upward, they often need to leave behind familiar surroundings such as family and places. They may also need to change their way of thinking and behavior. The individual will need to adapt to the new environment as a result of their upward movement and adopt different behaviors in the new society. The fourth one is downward mobility. Downward mobility takes place when a person moves from a higher position in a society to a lower one. It can occur when someone is caught performing a wrongful act that can result in the loss of the position they currently hold. Downward mobility can be extremely stressful for people who face a rapid decline in their social status. They may find it hard to adapt to the new environment as it is not similar to the standard of living they are used to. Downward mobility is an example of the extent to which a society values equal opportunity and structure. The fifth one, intergenerational mobility. Intergenerational mobility happens when the social position changes from one generation to another. The change can be upward or downward. For example, a father worked in a factory while his son received an education that allowed him to become a lawyer or a doctor. Example, such societal change also causes the generation to adopt a new way of living and thinking. Intergenerational mobility is affected by the differences in the parents and their offspring upbringing, changes in population, and changes in occupation. The sixth one, intragenerational mobility. The intragenerational change in societal position occurs during the lifespan of a single generation. It can also refer to a change in position between siblings. One way is when a person climbs up the corporate ladder in their career. For example, an individual starts their career as a clerk and through their life moves on to a senior position such as a director. One sibling may also achieve a higher position in society than their brother and sister.
So now, let's talk about the other topic of our presentation, and that is social inequality. Social inequality is a condition of unequal access to the benefits of belonging to any society. In a purely equal society, every citizen is equally able to contribute to the overall well-being of that society, and they are equally able to benefit from their membership within that society. Social inequality is usually the result of inner social treatment, biases, and prejudices that inform unjust government regulations. Social inequality can be further broken down into two modes: direct and indirect. Direct social inequality occurs when unfair treatment of a group or groups is deliberate and can be present in both community or government capacities. Direct inequality is a purposeful act that takes away resources, opportunities, and/or rights from some and not others. Examples include governmental legislation mandating the segregation of schools and other public places along racial lines. Inner social business owners refusing to serve clients based on sexual orientation. Indirect social inequality occurs when unfair treatment of a group or groups is not the explicit purpose of a policy or action, but still results in social inequality. Examples include in governmental legislation that eliminates or limits early and mail-in voting and/or requires photo ID. The stated purpose of these laws is to mitigate voter fraud, but the consequence is that people who often can't vote in person only one election day. Students, the elderly, or those who can't otherwise afford to leave work or transport themselves to polling stations are disadvantaged. In intersocial, purchasing clothing that was made in sweatshops. Sweatshop laborers are overworked, underpaid, and often work in unsafe working conditions, hindering their ability to contribute to and benefit from society. So, while buying clothing itself does not create social inequality, it supports conditions that do. Buying food and produce that use harmful pesticides.
So, after we discuss the comparison of these two, now let's talk about is there's relation or connection between social mobility and inequality. While accepting that an inverse relation of some kind exists between inequality and mobility, we begin by reviewing criticisms of recent attempts by economists to express this relation in terms of income inequality and mobility. The relation between social inequality and social mobility has been discussed from a number of different standpoints. A view often taken from a broadly liberal position is that socio-political concerns over inequality are mitigated if mobility is at a high level. That is, if the extent to which more or less advantaged social positions are transmitted across generations is limited and individuals' life changes are not closely tied to the circumstances of their birth. It is this view that would appear to underlie the fact that in countries such as the UK and the US, in which over recent decades social inequality has significantly widened, increasing mobility has become a prime focus of political and policy interest. Rather than any tension become recognized between inequality and mobility, what is implied is that if inequality is the problem, mobility is the solution. According to Kruger in 2012 and Korak in 2013, sociologists have always tended to be skeptical of this liberal position because of their awareness of the ways in which inequality of condition can compromise equality of opportunity. However, of the late strongest challenge has come from economists. What is claimed is that a direct inverse relation can be shown between income inequality and intergenerational income mobility. This is actually a best-fitting straight line drawn through a vibrant scattered point of national societies in which a measure of mobility, the intergenerational earnings elasticity or IEE, on the y-axis is set against Gini coefficients for income inequality on the y-axis. Mobility appears lower in societies where inequality is higher.
How is social inequality related to social mobility? As stated above, social inequality and social mobility are related. There exists an inverse relationship between social inequality and social mobility. In a society where exists high inequality based on religion, caste, sex, etc., have less social mobility. This means they are deprived of equal opportunities in their life. Thus, the outcome of their life is affected to a great extent by social inequality. Similarly, in a society where there is less inequality, social mobility is high. In those societies, the life of the individual is not affected by inequalities and they enjoy equal opportunities to achieve their goal. The social mobility of a country depends upon social equality in the country. It is determinant to find the level of inequality existing in a society. Recently, India ranked very low in the Global Social Mobility Index, which clearly indicates that there are still certain inequalities existing in the country on various grounds.
The impact of social inequality into our society. First is the gap between rich and poor. It strongly influences people's health and well-being as well as the human capital formation and social cohesion. Second, is the inequality causes a wide range of health and social problems, from reduced life expectancy and higher infant mortality to poor educational attainment, lower social mobility, and increased levels of violence and mental illnesses. Third is the differences between more and less equal societies are large and everyone is affected by them. Inequality affects our intimate, personal lives and it psychologically divides us from the status, support, and solidarity that kept us well. On the other hand, the impact of social mobility into our society is that when more people in society experience upward social mobility, it can lead to societal anomie, where the standards of conduct or values of society begin to disappear and new standards have not yet developed. People in an anomic society may feel emotional distress and lack a sense of purpose.
So that's the end of our presentation. I hope you learned a lot in our discussion. If the inequality is the problem, the mobility is the solution. Thank you for watching and have a good day.